Greetings ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my video tutorial for Lurker. In this video I will be covering basic rules that Lurker adheres to, his interaction with traps, how to preempt him, and what information you should communicate to other players. After that I'll explain on how to correctly use doors when playing versus Lurker, show some tips on how to survive against him when he's chasing you down, and how you can track his timer on when he's able to spawn next. And lastly, I'll give some tips on how to play as Lurker. Lurker has an appearance of a human who got his entire skin ripped off his body. He exists in two forms, ghost and flesh form. While in ghost form, Lurker is invisible, is able to pass through all doors as if they do not exist for him, and moves very fast, somewhat faster than a sprinting survivor. He also cannot see any survivors. The only way for him to find survivors in ghost form is to activate traps which are scattered throughout the map and listen to them when they get triggered by the survivors. After a certain time passes, Lurker may materialize into his flesh form by pressing the E button, signified by the screen turning into yellow color. While in the flesh form he is significantly slower, moving just faster than a walking survivor, but way slower than a sprinting survivor. In this form he is also able to kill survivors with his double swipe. Also in this form he can see doors and can interact with them the same way the survivors do. His time in flesh form is limited and he will forcibly despawn once it runs out. Lurker can always manually despawn earlier by pressing the E button again, thus shortening the time he needs to respawn again. When playing versus Lurker, always split up, never walk around the map in full piles like lemmings, as it is extremely easy for Lurker to murder you. Depending on the map, usually groups of 2 people work fine, as one can search a room while the other person can guard the entrance and listen to the sound cues. Not every object you see is an active trap. When the game starts, the traps that Lurker can use get randomized, and every time he materializes and then dematerializes, they get randomized again. So a heater in the hallway you just saw might not make a sound this time, but it is likely to trigger the next time you walk by it after the Lurker spawned. All traps need to be armed by the Lurker first before they can make any noise, and if you just happen to stand for a while next to one without anything happening and then it suddenly goes off, you need to get out of the place you are at and search for some safe hiding spot, because most of the time the Lurker will spawn in and start chasing you. One way to figure out where the Lurker is through traps. As noted earlier, when they suddenly go off at your place, you can be sure he's right next to you. The other way is whenever Lurker walks over you in his ghost form. You will hear one of the 3 possible effects, 2 being more frequent and the third you usually hear if he is standing still, camping an area. One of these happens every time you cross Lurker while he is in ghost form, and only you can hear it. Whenever the Lurker materializes, a new background music starts playing. Not everybody can hear it, as it is dependent on how close the Lurker is to you. Once you hear the music, be careful. Best course of action is to search for a hiding spot. Rarely, the music won't be playing at all. That's usually an issue with the host you're playing on, not being able to transmit the information correctly. Aside from the extra background music, there is also a low echoing rumbling noise. You will sometimes hear that, and that can serve as a definitive sign that he spawned in, and if you cannot immediately see him, he'll likely spawn right behind you. Likewise, the music usually stops playing when he dematerializes. That also applies to when he goes away from you far enough though. And also when he dematerializes there is a different low echo rumbling noise. Important thing about Lurker is to track where he is at. Communicate through chat as much as you can. Most importantly, whenever you hear Lurker spawn, communicate with the other players through chat that he spawned, if you have the time that is, so they are aware of it and can take actions accordingly. Because if he spawned in your area and is trying to chase you down, that means other 3 players can explore their area without any interruptions. Use some short signs like S, or if you have the time or the finger speed, just write fully spawn, and whenever the Lurker dematerializes, say something like DS or despawn. Also communicate the area you're at. Just knowing that he spawned isn't exactly super helpful. Correct way would be something like S, then you run to safety and then type kitchen, or just type S kitchen. And if you think more info is important, you could communicate whenever he passes through you, so your teammates would approximate where he is headed to.
Something like pass and then the location likely be enough. Pass, PS, or W, or walk are all fine. Example, W, toilets. Whenever he spawns, usually you run into a room, close the door and stand in front of the door, effectively blocking it. Do not move in any way with the WASD keys, as it allows the lurker to force the door open and shove you aside. Assuming the door opens into the room, you did everything right and the lurker won't be able to budge you. That's how you protect yourself from the flash form lurker. However, when playing versus experienced lurkers who are able to telegraph the way you're moving without seeing you, those can often predict which room you're hiding in, and will often walk into your room while in the ghost form and then spawn inside. To survive against cases like that, you leave the door half open and then stand right in front of the door crack, and as soon as you hear the breathing effect or the loud heartbeat, you can slip through the half open door and search for a different room to hide in, as chances are high he's already spawning behind you. For that reason, as a rule of thumb, whenever playing versus lurker, leave the doors half open. It is much easier to fling a door closed when it is half open rather than when it is all the way open to a wall. When dealing with double doors, you usually want to open only one of the doors, so it will be easier to manage. If you're playing among friends, agree on one side you always want to open to avoid confusion. And although that should be obvious, it still needs to be said, avoid hiding in one room with multiple people. If possible, always hide in separate rooms. Remember, it is easier for lurker to kill a bunch of people at once. Some maps just flat out have no rooms to hide in. To survive against the lurker there, you need to learn to conserve your stamina and find objects you can abuse as circular juking spots. The easiest thing to abuse are white kitchen tables, billiard tables, and bar counters. Example with a billiard table. The way to do it is to hold down the W button and move with A and D buttons while slightly tilting the camera. You need to face the lurker so you can see which way he is moving, so you can start moving in the opposite direction. As he is faster, whenever he starts catching up, tap the shift button to start sprinting and then let go of the W button whenever you think you equalize the situation. Optimally, you want the lurker to be exactly at the opposite side of the table. Lurker has no RNG aside from which traps are active on the level.
You ugly bitch.
Everything is calculated, and thus there are fixed values to when he can spawn, how long he's materialized, and when he can respawn after dematerializing. When a game starts, for Lurker to be able to materialize, it takes 50 seconds. When the Lurker spawns and despawns instantly, it takes him about 23 since the update. In general, when he materializes, he can run around for up to 40 seconds in flesh form. After that, he will forcibly despawn. If he fully uses the 40 seconds, it will take him 50 seconds to respawn. If he walks around for 5 seconds in flesh form, it will take him about 30 seconds to respawn. Exact values can't be really pinpointed so easily anymore since the last update. Still, if you know that, you can start counting the seconds to approximate his timer for respawn. Especially useful when you're the last survivor, and he knows exactly where you need to go, so it all comes down to timing and counting. You'll be able to calculate how many seconds you have to check a room or a dead end area before he respawns to kill you. Even though you can't get the exact timer, it's still better than nothing. Always remember that survivors have to deal with insanity, so never pass up an opportunity to rack their insanity points up. Take notes on what they are doing, how they react to you spawning, how do they hide, do they block doors, and so on. When playing as Lurker, pay attention as to how many traps are currently at your disposal for an area. Remember which traps you've set, so if a trap goes off far away, you would know what place it was, allowing you to continue pursuing the survivors. As of 2.0 RC11, the Fallen update, traps are now highlighted white whenever they are triggered by the survivors. Do not mindlessly activate all traps. Activate 1 or 2 for a passage to see if somebody enters, and use the remaining ones to track and pinpoint the survivor's location. Again, that of course is depending utterly on the situation. If you run out of traps or there are simply no traps active for an area, but you know the survivors are in this area, remember that they reset every time you re-enter the ghost form. Sometimes these survivors will stall on purpose, throwing you off. Sometimes you will have to spawn in without hearing any traps just to see how far they got, what is missing, where you should probably go next. That mostly depends on how well you know the map. Oftentimes it is good to spawn into a high traffic area, that where you know the survivors are likely to be right now, to see if you can catch them off guard and kill some of them. A common lurker technique is to set a chain of traps that would act as an indicator where the survivors are currently walking. Commonly, you would see a survivor enter an area, trigger a trap and then start running ahead. On his way, he will keep triggering traps. As lurker, you can basically visualize the paths he is running without actually seeing him. That would be called telegraphing. Sniping is when you are certain where a survivor is. You can spawn in and usually, if you are correct, right on top of the survivor and instantly kill him. Then despawn again to conserve the respawn time for your next spawn. Usually a follow-up for telegraphing.
And that is it for the Lurker tutorial. Thank you for watching, and please leave your feedback and comments in the comment section below.